Oh
Hey there, easy
my
now.
God.
That's a good boy.
Tom Harrington was sitting in the kitchen of his farmhouse when his phone began to buzz. He was drinking a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, and he was staring at a letter from the bank that sat on the table in front of him. The letter was bad news. It was always bad news now. But this particular letter was the worst kind of bad news, because it had numbers on it that could not be ignored or pushed aside or hoped away. Tom had learned to recognize the feeling of his world getting smaller, and he felt that feeling right now. His daughter Sarah called from the living room and told him to come look at the computer. Sarah was sitting at the desk with her hands on the keyboard, and her eyes were wide. She had a strange expression on her face, the kind of expression that people get when they see something they do not quite understand, but know is important. Tom walked slowly into the room because he was tired, and moving took effort now. Everything took effort now. Sarah pointed at the computer screen without saying anything. The screen showed a social media page, and Tom saw pictures of Storm. There were a lot of pictures of Storm. Tom blinked because he did not remember taking most of these pictures, or at least he did not remember putting them on the internet. But there they were. There was Storm in the barn, looking thin and scared with his head down. There was Storm in the pasture, looking confused. There was Storm running, and in that picture, his mane was flying and his legs were stretched out, and his whole body seemed to shine with joy and health and life. Sarah turned to look at Tom, and she said the words very slowly so that he would understand them. She said, "Dad, your post has been shared 40,000 times. 40,000 times. In just 4 hours." Tom sat down on the chair next to the desk because his legs did not feel strong anymore. He looked at the screen, and he did not know what to say. He read some of the comments. There were so many comments. People were writing things like, "This made me cry, and I needed to see this today," and "This man understands kindness." There were comments from people in other countries. There were comments from people who said they worked with horses. There were comments from people who said they did not work with horses, but they understood the story because they understood what it felt like to be broken. Sarah kept scrolling, and Tom kept reading. Some people were sharing their own stories about animals that had saved them. Some people were sharing stories about giving second chances to people, not just animals. Some people were telling Tom that his story had changed the way they saw the world. Some people were offering to help. These people were offering money. They were offering to come work on the farm. They were offering to donate hay and grain and supplies. They were offering prayers and good wishes and belief. Tom did not understand how this had happened. He had taken these pictures weeks ago when Storm was healing and becoming healthy again. He had written a simple post about where the horse had come from and what he was trying to do with the farm. He had not written it, thinking that anyone would care very much. He was just a farmer from Kentucky trying to save his farm and help a broken horse. He did not think his story was special. He did not think his story was the kind of story that made people cry or that made people want to change their lives. But apparently, he was wrong. The internet was full of people who cared about his story. People were making videos about Tom and Storm. People were creating artwork of Storm running through the fields. People were writing poems and songs about second chances and kindness and broken things becoming beautiful. Artists were drawing pictures of Tom's face and Storm's face together. Someone had made a short film that edited together all of Tom's pictures with gentle music in the background. That film had been watched by almost 500,000 people. The local news station called that day. They said they wanted to come out to the farm and film a real story about Tom and Storm. They said that the internet was talking about Tom, and that meant that real people in the real world wanted to know more about him. They said this was a human interest story, and they wanted to tell it properly with real cameras and a real reporter. Tom said yes, even though he was nervous, because he did not know how to talk to reporters. He was just a farmer. He knew how to talk to horses and how to fix things on a farm and how to work hard. He did not know how to talk to people who had cameras. The news crew arrived on a Tuesday morning. There was a reporter named Michelle and a cameraman named David. They brought equipment and lights and microphones. They wanted Tom to show them the farm. They wanted Tom to show them Storm. They wanted Tom to tell them the story of where Storm had come from and how Tom was trying to help him. Tom tried to talk, but his voice felt strange and small in his chest. He was not used to being the center of attention. He was used to working quietly and letting his work speak for itself. But as Tom talked, something changed. As he looked at Storm and talked about the horse and talked about the farm and talked about what it meant to believe in something when you had no reason to believe, his voice became stronger. The words came easier. His hands stopped shaking. He told the reporter about the day at the auction house, when he had decided to buy this horse that nobody else wanted. He told her about how broken the horse had been, and how it felt to be broken himself. He told her about the 45 seconds when Storm ran free for the first time, and how watching that had changed everything inside him. Michelle, the reporter, had tears in her eyes when Tom finished talking. David, the cameraman, said it was beautiful, and they had gotten everything they needed. They told Tom that this story would be on the news that night. They said it would probably get picked up by bigger news stations. They said that the internet had given him a platform, and now the real world was going to listen too. That night, Tom and Betty and Sarah sat on the couch and watched the story air on television. It was 5 minutes long. It showed Tom in the pasture with Storm. It showed the before pictures of the broken horse. It showed the now pictures of the healthy horse. It showed Tom's face when he talked about second chances. Tom watched himself on the television screen, and he barely recognized the man he was seeing. He looked tired and sad, but he also looked like he believed in something important. The news story went viral too. By the next morning, it had been watched by millions of people. News stations in other states picked up the story. A producer from a major morning show called and asked if Tom would come on their show and talk about Storm and about the farm. A magazine wanted to send a photographer. A radio station wanted to interview Tom. Publishers wanted to know if Tom had ever thought about writing a book. Tom stood in his kitchen the next morning and tried to understand how his life had changed overnight. Just 1 week ago, he was facing the loss of everything. Just 1 week ago, he thought his story was a story of failure. But somewhere, somehow, his story had become a story of hope, and people all over the world wanted to hear it. They wanted to believe that broken things could become beautiful again. They wanted to believe that kindness was still powerful. They wanted to believe that giving up was not the answer. Tom looked out the window at Storm grazing in the pasture, and he understood something important. He understood that his story was not really about him at all. His story was about what happens when someone believes in something enough to take a chance on it. His story was about what can happen when you refuse to give up, even when you have every reason to give up. And now, millions of people were listening to that story, and they were beginning to believe in it
more
too.
than 8,000 messages. He did not know how to handle this. He had never received more than a few emails in a week, and now his email was filling up faster than he could read the messages. Sarah showed him how to create a folder for all the messages so they would not take over his entire inbox. They created a folder called Farm Messages, and thousands of emails began collecting inside it. Tom tried to read them all at first, but after the first 100, he realized he would need help. He could not possibly read 8,000 messages by himself. He could not possibly respond to 8,000 messages by himself. Betty sat down with him, and together they started to read through the messages. And as they read, they both began to cry. The messages came from people all over the United States and from people in other countries too. People from England sent messages. People from Australia sent messages. People from Japan and Brazil and France and Canada all sent messages. Some messages were just a few sentences. Some messages were long letters that went on for pages and pages. But all of them said similar things. All of them said that Tom's story had touched their hearts. All of them said that watching Tom believe in Storm had made them believe in something they had stopped believing in. One woman wrote a message that said she had been thinking about ending her life, but she watched the news story about Tom and Storm, and something inside her changed. She said that if a broken horse could become beautiful and strong again, then maybe a broken person could too. She said she was going to call her doctor and get help. She said that Tom had saved her life. Another message came from a man who said he had been struggling with anger for many years. He said he had hurt people he loved, and he did not know how to change. He said that watching Tom be so patient and gentle with Storm had shown him that change was possible. He said he was starting to go to therapy. A young girl sent a message that said she had been bullied at school, and she felt like nobody wanted her. She said that watching Storm's story made her understand that just because other people did not see her value did not mean she had no value. She said she was trying to be braver. Tom read message after message, and each one broke his heart and healed his heart at the same time. He was reading about people's pain and people's struggles and people's hope, and he was realizing that his story meant something to all of them. His decision to buy a broken horse had somehow reached people on the other side of the world and given them hope. But the messages were not the only thing that came. On the fourth day, Tom received his first donation. It was from a woman in Ohio who said she did not have much money, but she was sending $50 to help save the farm. She wrote that she did not have a lot of extra money because she had her own struggles, but she wanted to help anyway. She said that Tom's story had changed her, and she wanted to be part of changing things for Tom too. That $50 donation was followed by another donation, and then another, and then dozens of donations. People were sending money. Some people sent $5. Some sent $20. Some sent $100. Some sent $500. A business owner from California sent $5,000. He wrote that he had read about Tom's story, and he wanted to invest in someone who believed in second chances. By the end of the first week, Tom had received more than $100,000 in donations. $100,000. Tom sat in his kitchen and looked at the number on the screen, and he could not understand it. This was enough money to pay off a large part of his debt to the bank. This was enough money to save the farm. This was enough money to give him the time he needed to build a real business and create something that would last. But more than the money, it was the messages that changed something inside Tom. The donations showed that people believed in him, but the messages showed him why they believed in him. They believed in him because he had shown them something that they needed to see. They needed to see someone who did not give up. They needed to see someone who believed in kindness when the world seemed full of cruelty. They needed to see someone who was willing to take a chance on something broken. Tom began to understand that his story was bigger than his farm. His story was bigger than his horse. His story was about something that all human beings need to believe in, which is the idea that things can get better, that broken things can be fixed, that pain can lead to healing, that giving up is not the only choice. Betty noticed that Tom was changing. He had been so sad and so hopeless before, but now there was light coming back into his eyes. He was smiling more. He was sleeping better at night. He was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. Betty held his hand one morning and she told him that she had faith in him again. She said she had almost lost faith, but watching the world respond to his story had brought her faith back. Sarah was reading all the emails and organizing them and making a list of people who had donated and people who had offered to help in other ways. Some people wanted to come work on the farm for free to help fix things. Some people wanted to send supplies. Some people wanted to donate hay and grain and horseshoes and veterinary supplies. Some people wanted to help with the website or social media. Some people wanted to help with the business planning. Tom realized that he was not alone. He had thought he was alone, but he was not. There were thousands of people who wanted to help him. There were thousands of people who believed in him. And they believed in him not because he was special or famous or important. They believed in him because he had done something simple and true. He had shown kindness to a broken creature. And in doing that, he had shown kindness to all the broken creatures in the world, including all the broken people. One night, Tom walked out to the barn to see Storm. The horse was sleeping, his head hanging low, his breathing steady and calm. Tom put his hand on Storm's neck, and he felt the warmth of the horse's body. Tom thought about the day at the auction house when nobody wanted this horse. He thought about how he had looked into Storm's eyes and seen something worth saving. He thought about how that moment had somehow reached into the hearts of thousands of people. Tom whispered to Storm, "You did this. You showed people something they needed to see. You saved the farm. You saved me." Storm lifted his head and looked at Tom with those big, gentle eyes, and Tom knew that the horse was listening. As Tom walked back to the house, he thought about all those emails waiting for him to read. He thought about all those people who had sent money and messages and hope. He thought about how his life had completely changed in just 1 week. A week ago, he was standing at the fence thinking about how he was going to lose everything. Now he was standing in the dark, looking at stars, and thinking about how everything was beginning again. By the second week, Tom's life had become completely different from anything he had ever known. He was no longer just a farmer. He was a person that millions of people had heard about. He was famous. The word felt strange in his mouth. Tom Harrington was not someone who was supposed to be famous. Tom Harrington was supposed to be a farmer who worked hard and kept his head down and did his job. But the phone kept ringing. The phone rang in the morning. The phone rang at lunch. The phone rang in the evening. It rang so much that Tom finally had to ask Sarah to answer it because he could not answer it anymore. Sarah took notes. She made lists. She was keeping track of all the people who wanted to talk to Tom, and the lists were getting longer every single day. A big publisher called. They wanted to know if Tom would write a book about his story. They said that Tom's story was the kind of story that people wanted to read. They said that they would help him write the book. They said that a book could reach even more people than the television story had reached. They offered Tom money, a real amount of money, just to write the book. A production company called. They wanted to make a movie about Tom and Storm. They said that Tom's story had all the elements of a great movie. It had struggle. It had hope. It had an animal that people loved. It had a man who believed in something when he had no reason to believe. They said they wanted to tell this story on a big screen so that even more people could see it. A speaking agency called. They represented people who gave talks at big events and conferences. They said that companies would pay Tom to come speak about his story. They said that people in boardrooms and in schools and in auditoriums wanted to hear directly from Tom about what had happened. They said they could book Tom for speaking events all across the country. They said they could make a lot of money doing this. A children's book company called. They want to make a picture book version of Tom's story for kids. They said that children needed to read about second chances and kindness, and Tom's story was the perfect way to teach them these things. A horse foundation called. They said they had seen the story, and they wanted to help Tom create a program where rescued horses could come to his farm. They said they would provide funding and resources. They said they wanted to be partners with Tom in building something that could help not just Storm, but hundreds of horses like Storm. Tom sat in his living room and listened to Sarah read all of these offers and opportunities, and he felt like his head was spinning. He had gone from being a man who might lose his farm to being a man who was being offered money and opportunities and partnerships from all over the country. It was too much. It was happening too fast. Betty came and sat next to him. She took his hand, and she looked at his face, and she could see that he was overwhelmed. She said to him, "Tom, you do not have to say yes to everything. You can pick the things that feel right to you. You can say no to the things that do not feel right." Tom nodded, but he was not sure what felt right anymore. Everything felt strange and big and scary. He thought about what his life had been just 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, he was sitting at this same kitchen table looking at a letter from the bank that was going to take away his farm. 2 weeks ago, he was alone and hopeless. Now he was surrounded by people who wanted to help him and opportunities that seemed endless. But Tom was a practical man, and practical men think about what is real and what is important. What was real was that his farm was in danger. What was important was saving the farm and helping horses. So Tom told Sarah which offers he wanted to accept and which offers he wanted to politely decline. He said yes to the book because he thought a book could help people understand about second chances. He said yes to the Horse Foundation because he wanted to help more horses like Storm. He said yes to some speaking events, but not too many because he did not want to leave the farm for too long. He said no to the movie at first because it felt too big and too strange, but he said maybe to it for later. Sarah started making phone calls and arranging things. Within 1 week, a book writer was coming to the farm to interview Tom and learn his story. The book writer was a woman named Lisa who had written other books before. She was nice, and she asked good questions, and she really listened to Tom's answers. Every day, for 2 weeks, Lisa came to the farm, and she sat with Tom, and she asked him questions. She asked him about his childhood. She asked him about his family. She asked him about the day he decided to buy Storm. She asked him about how it felt to lose everything and then have his life change overnight. Tom answered all of her questions honestly and carefully. As Lisa listened, she started to understand something. She understood that Tom's story was not just about a horse and a farmer. Tom's story was about what happens when a human being decides that kindness matters more than anything else. It was about what happens when someone chooses to believe in something even when belief seems crazy. The Horse Foundation sent a team to visit the farm. They looked at the barns and the pastures and the equipment. They talked to Tom about his vision for the future. Tom told them that he wanted to create a place where broken horses could come to heal. He wanted to create a place where people could learn about horses and about kindness and about second chances. The foundation people listened and they nodded and they said they could help him make this happen. News reporters from other cities started calling. They wanted to come film follow-up stories about how Tom's life had changed. Local schools wanted to bring their students to the farm to meet Tom and Storm and learn about the story. A children's show wanted Tom to come on their program and talk about Storm. But something was happening inside Tom that nobody could see. Tom was starting to feel the weight of all this attention. He was grateful for it, truly grateful, but he was also tired. He was tired of talking about his story. He was tired of being famous. He wanted to just be a farmer again. He wanted to just work with his horses and not think about books and movies and speaking events. One morning, Tom woke up early and he walked out to the barn before anyone else was awake. He went to Storm's stall and he sat in the hay next to his horse. He did not say anything. He just sat there with his hand on Storm's neck, and he felt the warmth of the horse's body, and he remembered what it felt like to just be with his horse without any cameras or reporters or book writers around. Storm turned his head and looked at Tom, and Tom could see in a horse's eyes that Storm was still the same horse. The horse did not care about books or movies or fame. The horse just wanted to be with Tom. The horse just wanted to eat and run and feel safe. Tom understood something important in that moment. He understood that his job was not to be famous. His job was not to sell his story or to become a celebrity. His job was to be true to what he believed in, which was kindness and second chances. The rest would take care of itself. Tom stood up and he looked at Storm and he said, "Thank you. Thank you for reminding me what is real." 2 months after the news story aired, Tom's farm had changed in ways that he never could have imagined. The farm was no longer a quiet place where a man and his horses lived alone. The farm had become a destination. People were coming from all over the country to see Storm. They were coming to meet Tom. They were coming because they wanted to understand how someone could believe in something so much that it changed the world. Tom had not expected this. He had expected the donations. He had expected the phone calls and the offers. He had expected the news reporters and the book writers. But he had not expected that people would actually come. He had not expected that families would drive for hours and hours just to see his horse and to stand in his pasture and to look at the place where a broken horse had learned to run again. At first, Tom was not sure what to do about all these visitors. Sarah suggested that they create a visiting day. One day a week when people could come to the farm and see Storm and hear the story. Tom agreed because he wanted to share what had happened. He wanted people to see that Storm was real and that the story was real and that second chances were real. The first visiting day, more than 300 people came to the farm. Tom could not believe it. 300 people parked their cars in the pasture and they walked up to where Tom was standing with Storm. They came from different states. They came in wheelchairs. They came with their children. They came alone. They came in groups. And all of them wanted the same thing. All of them wanted to see Storm and understand what his story meant. Tom stood in front of them, and he told the story again, the way he had told it so many times now that he could tell it without thinking. He told them about the auction house. He told them about buying Storm for $120. He told them about the 45 seconds when Storm ran free for the first time. And as he told the story, he watched the people's faces change. He watched them cry. He watched them smile. He watched them understand something important. After he finished telling the story, people came up and talked to him. They wanted to touch Storm. They wanted to stand next to the horse and take pictures. They wanted to tell Tom their own stories. And that was when Tom started to understand what was really happening. A woman came up to him with her teenage daughter. The woman told Tom that her daughter had been struggling with depression and had been talking about wanting to hurt herself. The mother said she had seen the story online and she did not know what else to do, so she decided to drive to Kentucky to see if maybe looking at Storm would help her daughter. The girl stood next to Storm and she put her hand on the horse's neck, and Tom watched her face change. He watched the darkness in her eyes lift just a little bit. She turned to her mother and she said, "Mom, look at him. He was so broken and now he is so beautiful. Maybe I could be beautiful again too." An old man came up to Tom. The old man said he was 84 years old and he had driven 8 hours to see Storm because he was dying. He said he had cancer and the doctors said he did not have much time left. He said that he had been afraid and angry and he did not want to die. But he had seen Tom's story and it had changed something inside him. He said that if a horse could heal from so much damage, then maybe there was hope even in dying. He said he wanted to spend his last days thinking about kindness instead of thinking about fear. A young man came up to Tom and told him that he was homeless. He said he had been living on the streets for 2 years and he had lost all hope. He said he saw Tom's story in a shelter where he was sleeping and something about it made him want to try again. He said he was going to go to a job training program and he was going to try to rebuild his life. A teacher came with her entire class of 4th graders. She told Tom that her students were learning about kindness and second chances, and she wanted them to see Storm as an example. The children stood in a circle around the horse, and Tom could see the wonder in their eyes. They understood without being told that this horse was special. They understood that something important had happened here. Tom started to see a pattern. People came to the farm broken. People came to the farm carrying pain and fear and hopelessness. But when they saw Storm, something changed inside them. When they stood next to a horse that had been through so much and had come out the other side, they started to believe that they could come out the other side too. So Tom made a decision. He decided that he would open the farm to visitors every weekend. He decided that anyone who wanted to come could come. He did not charge any money because he did not want money to stop people from coming. He wanted every person who needed to see Storm to be able to see Storm. Sarah helped organize it. They created a schedule so that people could come in smaller groups so that Storm would not be overwhelmed. They set up a small parking area. They created a simple path from where people parked to where Storm lived. They put benches where people could sit and just watch the horse. And every single weekend, people came. Sometimes 100 people came. Sometimes 300 people came. They came from all 50 states. They came from other countries. A man came from England. A woman came from Australia. People came because they had heard about Storm and they wanted to experience the healing that they had heard about. One Saturday, Tom was standing with a group of visitors and he watched a young woman walk up to Storm. The woman was very thin and very pale, and Tom could see that she was sick. She put her arms around Storm's neck and she cried. When she let go, she looked at Tom and she said, "Thank you. I came here because I wanted to say goodbye. I am going into the hospital for surgery and I was scared I would not come out. But seeing him, seeing how strong and beautiful he is after everything he went through, it gave me courage. I'm going to go into that surgery not being afraid anymore." Tom understood that this was why the story had gone viral. This was why millions of people had seen it and shared it and believed in it. The story was not really about a horse and a farmer. The story was about the human need to believe that broken things can be fixed. The story was about the need to believe that pain can lead to healing. The story was about the need to believe that someone, somewhere, still believed in you when you had stopped believing in yourself. Every person who came to the farm was like Storm. Every person was carrying scars. Every person was trying to find a way forward. And Storm, with his quiet strength and his calm presence, was showing all of them that it was possible. 1 year after that cold Tuesday morning, when Tom stood at his fence thinking about how he was going to lose everything, he stood in the same place and looked out at his farm and could not quite believe what he was seeing. The farm had not just been saved. The farm had been transformed into something bigger and more meaningful than anything Tom had ever dreamed it could become. The numbers told the story. Tom had received over $1 million in donations in the first year, not just from the initial viral moment, but from the book that had been published, which had become a bestseller. People all over the world were reading about Tom and Storm and second chances. The movie had been filmed and was getting ready to come out next month. Major actors had wanted to be part of telling this story. A famous director had wanted to direct it. People in Hollywood understood that Tom's story was bigger than Hollywood. Tom's story was about the human heart. But more important than the money was what the money had allowed Tom to do. With the donations and the foundation support, Tom had started a real program called Second Chances Farm. The program was built on a simple idea that broken horses and broken people could heal together. The farm now had 40 horses. Some of them were rescued from slaughterhouses. Some of them had been abused. Some of them were old and had been left to die. But all of them had come to Second Chances Farm, and all of them were healing. And as they healed, the people who came to work with them were healing too. Tom had hired 5 full-time staff members. He had hired a horse trainer named Marcus who had come to the farm as a visitor a year ago because he was struggling with depression. Watching Storm had changed Marcus's life, and now Marcus spent his days helping other horses and other people find their way back to health. Marcus worked with kids who had been in trouble with the law. He taught them how to train horses. He taught them about patience. He taught them that if you believed in something, you could change it. Tom had hired a veterinarian named Dr. Sarah, who came to the farm 3 days a week to take care of the horses. Dr. Sarah had read the book and had seen the movie premiere at a special showing, and she had decided that this was what she wanted to do with her skills. She wanted to help the horses that nobody else wanted to help. Schools started sending students to the farm. Teachers brought classes to learn about compassion and second chances. The school system had created a curriculum based on Tom's story. Teachers in 43 states were now teaching lessons about kindness and belief using Storm as an example. Universities wanted to study what was happening at Second Chances Farm. Researchers came to measure the mental health outcomes of people who worked with the horses. They found that people who came to the farm with depression left feeling more hopeful. People who came with anger learned to be calm. People who came broken started to believe they could be fixed. One day, a woman came to the farm who had not expected to come. Her name was Margaret, and she was the bank officer who had originally sent Tom the letter that told him he was going to lose his farm. Margaret had seen the movie premiere, and she had cried in the theater. She had realized that she was the one who had delivered the news that almost broke Tom. She had written Tom a letter asking for his forgiveness. Tom met Margaret at the farm, and he hugged her. He told her that he did not blame her. He told her that she was just doing her job. He told her that if she had not sent that letter, he might never have decided to buy Storm, and none of this would have happened. Margaret walked around the farm with Tom, and she met the horses. She met Marcus and the kids he was training. She met the people who had come from far away to find healing. And Margaret understood something important. She understood that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things that come after. The donations kept coming, but Tom did not need them anymore. The book was making money. The movie was going to make money. The farm was sustainable. So Tom created a foundation. Any money that came in after the farm's needs were met would go to helping other people start their own healing programs. Tom wanted to help other farms in other states do what he was doing. He wanted to spread the idea of second chances beyond his one small farm in Kentucky. On the anniversary of the day, Tom bought Storm. The local town held a celebration. They closed down Main Street and put up banners that said, "1 year of second chances." More than 2,000 people came to the celebration. Local businesses donated food. The high school marching band played music. A stage was set up, and people told their stories about how Tom and Storm had changed their lives. Tom stood on that stage, and he looked out at the crowd, and he thought about how different this was from a year ago. A year ago, he was alone. A year ago, he was hopeless. A year ago, he thought his life was over. Now he was standing in front of 2,000 people who had all been touched by his story in some way. He looked for Storm in the crowd, and there was the horse, standing calm and strong, wearing a special blanket that had been made for him by the town. Storm did not know he was famous. Storm did not understand that his life had changed the world. Storm just knew that he was loved and that he was safe and that he mattered. Tom's voice shook when he spoke. He told the crowd that he had learned something very important in the past year. He had learned that everyone was like Storm. Everyone had been broken by something. Everyone had a scar. Everyone had pain that they were carrying. But everyone also had the ability to heal if someone believed in them. Everyone had the ability to become strong again if they had patience and kindness and time. He said, "When I bought Storm at that auction house, I did not know I was going to change the world. I did not know that my story was going to reach millions of people. I just knew that I could not walk away from a broken creature that needed help. I just knew that I had to believe in something when everything told me to give up. And that belief, that simple choice to believe, changed everything." The crowd was silent, and then they erupted in applause. People were crying. People were standing and cheering. Tom's wife Betty came and stood next to him and put her arm around him. Sarah came and hugged him. His son came and shook his hand. The town that had almost lost Tom to poverty and despair was now celebrating him as their hero. But Tom knew the truth. The hero was not him. The hero was the colt that nobody wanted. The hero was the horse that had been broken and had learned to run again. The hero was the horse that had taught millions of people that broken things could become beautiful. The hero was Storm, standing there in his special blanket, not knowing that he had saved a man and a farm and inspired people all over the world to believe in second chances. As Tom looked out at the crowd and at his beautiful farm and at his horse, he understood that sometimes the most unexpected things happen when we decide to believe in something. Sometimes the greatest adventures start with the smallest act of kindness. Sometimes buying a broken horse for $120 can change the entire direction of your life and the lives of countless others. The viral moment had started with a simple post on the internet, but it had become something much bigger. It had become a movement. It had become a reminder that kindness was still powerful in the world. It had become proof that one person with one horse could reach millions of hearts and inspire millions of people to believe again. And that was the real magic of Storm.